Gospel's involvement here at Cloud EXPO Europe has been around predominantly the blockchain track. I'm speaking in the storage and infrastructure track, and it's going to be around where Gospel is being deployed, what it is, and the impact we're having on these, existing technologies, storage, security, and systems management. So it'll be all around, where the tool's being deployed, the benefits, and where customers are seeing cost savings.
So what we want to talk today about is sort of three things. What the challenge that we're trying to solve, how we've solved it, and what this means for businesses. We've been talking about this for sort of 2 to 3 years now, where there is this huge problem in businesses of the lack of trust in data. And that goes across, regulated industries, audited industries, like pharmaceutical, regulated supply chain, nuclear. And the challenge has been that it's been very hard for the general public to understand what that means for a company. And what we've seen this week with Facebook is that everybody's data has been sold off for about $60. And people are quickly losing faith in these centralized security functions, whether it's a business, and people want control of their data. And as we look at the next generation of people coming into the business, 16, 18, 19-year-olds, when they come into our businesses, they're going to want control of how their data is used, shared, modified, and so on. So this is a problem we've been, fixing. From a business point of view, there's a big problem when you're sharing data in a business. It tends to go out one way. You never get it back because it tends to be done via public cloud storage, email, and all of these centralized security functions, which were once an asset. They've now become a liability because people are working around them because they're too hard. And this is why shadow IT, and we're in this world of hybrid cloud where some data's on premises, other data's in the cloud. Somebody's moved the instance. You don't know if it's been moved out of the country where it should be in or not. So there's this huge problem of trust. So a couple of years ago, and this is why we began to build Gospel, we've built a platform which is able to integrate total security into the data. We're using blockchain, as you probably gathered by the title, because it gives us the ability to create this distributed data platform, which has been done by design. So instead of trying to create it with databases and TLS links and distributed regions, backed up databases, which all degrade over time, we wouldn't really be solving anything. So we've built it on blockchain because it gives us the ability to have this distributed nature, a total chain of custody. So back to the beginning of day one on a data set, whether it's an employee history of when they were employed, all the way through to when they leave the business, how that data is shared with healthcare providers, travel agencies, how also data is shared to applications. So if you think, at the moment, data security is done on top of a database, right? And this is why there's a lot of vendors who have been in this space for a long time and have been very successful, but are now starting to decline because people have realized that data security, when it's in the data, is more powerful because you're moving away from this stack on top of a database, which has got, database administration, in middleware, integration, single sign-on, all these systems on top of the data. And all you're trying to simply do is control who sees what, whether it's a person or a machine. Right. So there's like this huge disconnect between what we as businesses are doing from a cost point of view versus what we're simply trying to achieve. And this is what we've solved with Gospel. We've created an enterprise data platform which is able to work in existing businesses and existing processes. In the blockchain world, there's a ton of noise and there's a lot of interesting things going on. There's even more uninteresting things going on. The problem is people are seeing blockchain in businesses as another silo. And what the last thing a business needs right now is another silo. It needs to work in existing processes. So what we've built, there's two elements. We've got an ingestion engine. This ingestion engine is able to take data from existing data sources, such as SAP databases, DB2, anything with a JDBC connector. It could be an API. It could be a CSV file, it could be a pay slip, it could be a contract, it could be a supply chain information about a vehicle. And we're able to ingest that. Everything's encrypted in transit and at rest. And we're able to put that into a distributed data store, which under the covers is using blockchain. So that's giving you total traceability back to day one on when it came in, who's accessed it, for what reason. We're then giving access to that data based on context. So if you're sharing employee data with a third party, let's say healthcare provider, you may only choose to share whether that person is over 18 versus sharing their full date of birth. We've built in security at the data layer, which means that we can give access to applications, people, and systems based on what it needs to see, based on context. So you've got contextual access to this data, and then you've got a contextual view of the data. Right. At the moment, that's achieved by putting more and more and more and more layers on top of the application, which over time, it adds up. This distributed setup, it can either run in our cloud or it can run on your on-premises. It's a Kubernetes stack. So essentially what that means is within the stack, you've got self-healing properties. So if one of these nodes ever goes down, it comes back up automatically. If this was a database world, if this one goes down and it comes back up and it has a different world view, it will try and make these two look like this one looks. So if that's been breached, hacked, or changed, you then need to go into this world of backups, snapshotting, rollback, and that's all costly and expensive. With Gospel, if one of these nodes goes down, comes back up, and it doesn't have the right world state, it gets outvoted. So you've got this really resilient architecture by design, rather than, with security built in, rather than as an afterthought. There's another element of Gospel which is very interesting. We use I guess a part of smart contracts, and we use logic. And it basically means we've created an automation engine which is able to talk to, ERP systems. And so, if you think about that BPM world where you've got a business process and there's rules that have to be met, such as ordering components or, a process that involves an ERP system, we're able to automate a lot of this. So this was an example we did last year where a client, a reseller of components, was actively being disrupted by Amazon. And their customers would order their first lift motor from these guys. And when the lift motor packed up, the next order would go through Amazon, because you panic, go on Google, and the first people that come up is Amazon. That lift motor was calling out to Maximo anyway, and they weren't doing anything with the data. So we've built in rules and a smart contract to actually automate the procurement. And at the end of the month, a CFO, it now gets a PDF that says, this month your bill is 50K for this reason. So now he knows exactly why the lift motor has just been delivered by FedEx, rather than having 10 lift motors in the office, and he has no idea what to do with. So the knock-on impact of this is intelligent procurement as opposed to like asset management. Because if you've got the right procurement, you don't need all these asset management practices, because you should always have the right amount of assets. Okay, so that's the automation engine. What it looks like in real life, especially in supply chains where you've got multiple people working on the same data, is essentially you're able to we can all be working on the same distributed ledger system, but you may have a very different view to what you have. You may see that this file is from a log file that came out of Oracle database, but you only see that log file came out at 10:57 in the morning, where you can see everything. You're essentially looking at the same data. Okay, so when you start growing this into supply chains where everyone in a supply chain has a different process and a different tool, right, somebody's got an ERP system over here, somebody's got a Mongo instance, somebody's got a spreadsheet template over here, that ledger bridge, the ingestion engine, is able to sit across all of these processes. So you're able to put this layer of governance across these very complicated environments where traditional tools have just simply failed, because nobody likes change. Nobody likes being told what to do and what to implement. So if you can integrate into existing systems, very powerful. Another part of what we've built is everything is API-based, and we integrate into existing security systems. So through our integration into Okta and lots of other identity management systems, is we're able to build a level of trust of people, actors, systems. So actually, once you've built enough credibility and you can prove who you say you are to gospel, you'll then be exposed data or given access to data. A lot of blockchains, have a different view of this. Blockchain has been promised to be this transparent thing across everyone where we can all track, a fruit that's going to go off in 3 days. Should it be on an immutable ledger? I don't know. But our view is unless you can prove yourself who you say you are to gospel, you'll be given access contextually rather than everyone sees everything about that fruit. Some of the reasons we're using blockchain, I think, are pretty hopefully apparent. It gives us a very interesting distributed platform. We're integrating into all these single sign-on systems. Everything is backed up, replicated, as you're going along. But what's the impact to existing systems? Existing systems, as we all know, I'm sure we've all worked in IT for a long time, we've all implemented different tools. They all degrade over time. On day one, they're brilliant. You've bought that, nice DB2 instance, you've got that MuleSoft layer, and then you've got all of these other tools on top. What happens is over time, on day two, the database administrator doesn't patch that database. The MuleSoft guy doesn't patch MuleSoft because he's secretly trying to buy Apogee. And there's all of these contextual reasons why all this stuff degrades over time. And back to my point earlier about, the disconnect between what we're trying to achieve in a business of simply securing data and exposing it correctly to a person or an application versus everything we're buying. And the cost of all of this stuff is only going one way. And I worked in IBM for a number of years, and storage, all of these hybrid cloud, solutions, middleware layers, they're getting expensive. And with all this new regulation coming down the road, I don't want to talk about it, GDPR, but everyone's talking about GDPR. You need total traceability. You need owners to have control of how their data is shared. In pharmaceuticals, there's a view within 5 to 10 years, every single patient will have control of how their data is shared, how their data is consented to. And after I've exposed my data and a transaction's taken place, you have viewed my data, I'll be able to then revoke that access. So as soon as a transaction occurs, that consent is revoked. So we're moving away from this centralized, and don't get me wrong, we're not some sort of anarchist view of IT. We're very realistic about what's going on and how people want control of their data. So this is happening to security, a lot of storage and security systems. From a storage point of view, the first question that always comes up when we say blockchain is you'll be able to store everything until the end of time. Right. A company recently said, in a business, there's on average 18 copies of the same bit of data. And we'll probably all sort of agree, whether it's 18, 16, 22, whatever it is, we all know it's replicated 10 times over, locally, backed up, and so on. Recently, one of our customers said, actually, for us, that's more like 42 times. So actually, when people say you need an immutable ledger of everything, over time, because everyone's working on a single version of the truth, regardless of what your role is, whether you're in the business, outside of the business, yes, that bit of storage is getting bigger over time, but it's getting bigger for the right reason, because you're building up proper access controls, you're building up a proper audit trail of where consent has been given. Whereas as opposed to storing the same version of that PDF file, that's totally useless to everyone, because only one person looked at it in the last 7 years. So yes, storage grows over time, but actually we're declining storage in other areas where that data isn't as useful anymore. Just want to talk to you about gospel. Last summer, June, July time, we were with a chief security officer of a bank in the city. We were talking him through the story, the platform, the technology, really down to the noughts and ones. And he said a very interesting thing. He said, if you think about it, because gospel, everything's immutable, and everything has a total audit trail of everything, whether it's access, changes, reads, or writes, the provenance of the data, whether it's a data from a server or a file or whatever, actually gets stronger with time. Because the platform is resilient. So from an architecture point of view, we're not declining there. Some would argue, I don't know, but the provenance of the data, which is essentially what we all care about. I don't think any of us buy these tools to care about the tool. All we're trying to do is simply secure the data. So the data provenance in gospel gets stronger over time. Just a couple of minutes on where it's being deployed. We're deployed in a number of businesses in the UK. We've quickly expanded into Europe, Benelux, and the US. In terms of industries, back to my point at the beginning, regulated industries. I guess, as of May the 26th or 25th, everyone's going to be a much more regulated industry. But where you've got to report to the FDA, where you've got to report to, the FCA, these regulated industries where you need total trust in an audit trail, a book of trades in a bank, why a trade was made, who it was viewed by, all the way through to when it gets reported to the SEC. So to be able to have total immutability in these data sets is quite important. So regulated industries, supply chains, we're doing some very interesting things in aviation and automotive, where you've got distributed supply chains, distributed assets moving quickly, and which merges into IoT. IoT has gone through a bit of a valley of death. Everyone was excited, and then sort of nothing happened, and then excited again. And we're doing this because all of these distributed systems and distributed sensors are still trying to work back to a centralized point. Funny enough, the German government about 4 years ago wrote a white paper, I think it was in conjunction with Porsche and BMW, that said for the IoT world to really take off, in the near future there has to come a distributed platform which is going to scale. Do I believe it's gospel for IoT? I don't know. But I know for that next world of IoT to really, rocket and grow, we need to be working in distributed ways. This is where we are as a business. We've won, I call this the vanity slide. It's a great slide, but actually it shows, analysts are taking this super seriously. The head of blockchain and IDC, constantly says to us, you guys are one of the most advanced, if not the most advanced, enterprise platform globally for businesses. You've removed the blockchain thing. One of our clients very early on said, when we use gospel, we don't even know we're using blockchain. And all of the manual projects that we've seen run in businesses, they tend to fail because it's a manual approach, it's very highly custom, and then when the professional services guys walk out the room, after 100 days, you're left with something very niche. And then you go out and hire blockchain skills, and there is no blockchain skills. And if you find them, they're very expensive. So we've removed ourselves from that blockchain thing to create this platform that anyone can use. Thank you. Thanks again. Cheers.